Welcome to Keep the Game Beautiful podcast. Each week, I highlight incredible people who are doing amazing things in soccer, the beautiful game. I'm Anna Turi, your host. Thank you for listening. I am excited to share with you today's episode. I had so much fun talking with Aiden today, and it was about a topic I really didn't know about. So going in, I had some questions, but most of the podcast, I was actually just curious and wondering about analytics and what they are. This past Sunday, I had the chance to go up to UWSP for an ID camp, and it was just amazing to be in the place where I am going to be going to college. It's crazy to think that very soon I am going to be in Wisconsin on my own. It's kind of scary, but it's so much fun. And I absolutely loved just being up there and kind of walking through campus again and just getting the feel for it. Today, when I talked to Aiden, I started off with not really knowing what analytics are. And it was really interesting to just hear and learn about. There's so much more that goes into it than I originally thought. And that's just what makes it so interesting. One thing Aiden mentions a lot today is the person first idea. I had never really thought about that in terms of numbers. He talked about that in his coaching journey as well, but also in the numbers, how we can put the people first in analytics. He definitely has an interesting coaching journey too, which definitely stuck with me. He started coaching when he was in high school. He was coaching his own teammates when he was out with an injury. And I think that's something that I'm kind of experiencing now, not the injury part, luckily, knock on wood, but I'm just experiencing coaching people similar to my age or maybe even younger, but it is still hard. And I kind of liked getting his aspect on it and how he kind of managed that. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today's guest is Aiden Ray. Aiden began his coaching and even analytic journey when he was just 16. He got his first role as head of performance analysis with Ohio Machine and Major League Lacrosse. He then found a role at Ohio University with the women's soccer program as the program analyst. Aiden continued to further his education and also started coaching a high school team. He has most recently worked with SC Groningen, working with scouting and goalkeeper analysis. Aiden, I'm wondering if you'd like to add anything else or talk about what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for having me on. Really happy to be on and be chatting a bit. I guess to start through my journey, I'd start off with a little bit of injury background and also being a wildly average player. I knew I wasn't going to be playing collegiately or anything like that. But with injury, I ended up learning that I really enjoyed coaching. I was with my high school team as a player, and the coaching staff wanted to keep me around. They wanted to keep me involved. So I ended up kind of stepping in and helping out the JV. From there, I kind of realized that I didn't want to go to college and become a historian or something along those lines. I wanted to stick with coaching. I wanted to be involved in the game, really fell in love with it as a coach more than a player, and kind of became just a process of networking right away, figuring out how I can stay involved, how I can be in the right conversations. First role was coaching with a futsal team. I was head coach of a U18 futsal team when I was 17 years old, which was really fun. It taught me a lot in terms of the dynamics being with people that were my classmates, my own age, and how we can improve as a group. And then I got on with Bristol Rovers, working in their performance analysis department, doing opposition scouting. And I along that way went into professional lacrosse a bit, was head of a department there. I was the first analyst in Major League Lacrosse, and joined Ohio University. So now that that's done, I currently live in Texas and have a role coming soon that I can't publicly say yet, but I am excited for that next chapter. So plenty of good things happening. It's been a very fun ride along the way.
On this podcast, I always start with the same three questions. First, what does the beautiful game mean to you?
So yeah, the beautiful game to me is the people side of it. Yeah, just the human element of it, the passion that everyone has when they're playing, the passion of communities getting together to support their teams, their players. To me, that's magical. To me, some of your best moments of the game come from a community uniting behind a team and just passion it brings.
What are actions or things you do to keep the game beautiful?
Yeah, it's primarily just try and keep the human side of it. Being an analyst, there's a lot of numbers involved, a lot of statistics. It can be difficult, and you will unfortunately meet analysts out there who might forget about the human side of it. But at the end of the day, 80, 90 minutes, however long you're playing, it doesn't matter how well you slept or what's going on in your personal life. A lot of people are expecting those demands of you. But if we can remember as a sport that players are human, they aren't robots out there. I think for me, I spend the most time trying to make sure that I don't forget that people are humans. That's how I try and keep the game beautiful, is reminding myself and others life happens and it's all part of the game.
How do you encourage others to keep the game beautiful?
I think with it, it's trying to promote a culture of family along each team. Um, you have to be able to stick up for each other, know what's going on in each other's lives if you want to be performing and having fun with it. It's going to be tough to have fun if you're uncomfortable with the people around you. You're probably not going to be able to have much success on the field. And yeah, as much as we like to say it's just a game, well, people enjoy winning a lot more than they enjoy losing. So it's about trying to find that way of creating a culture of everyone getting along and just enjoying being there with each other. So a lot of that for me comes with essentially a lot of like training drills or personality testing is one thing that I've kind of gone into a lot. Not to dive too deep into psychology. Um, but yeah, I've learned that using basically personality types, we can create partnerships and relationships within the team, and that'll maximize how much fun everyone is having. It's all about trying to find a way to keep it fun, to keep the results on the field.
I was doing a little bit of research before we hopped on today, and I was reading how much you enjoyed psychology. Why is this something that you enjoy so much, and why do you enjoy the mental part of the game as well?
That's a very good question. If I'm honest, for the why do I enjoy it so much, I have no idea. Yeah, it's just become something that I really enjoy. Kind of my free time, I spend reading a lot of social behavior, psychology books, posts, things like that. And yeah, I think that the reason why it just brings a lot of value to it is it helps kind of explain that little bit more. It helps me understand why a player or why a coach responds to something in a certain way. And if I can be changing the way I communicate based on what's going to do well with the player, what's going to do well with the staff that I'm working with, to make sure it's in a way where they're retaining it and where they're understanding it, it's going to be a much smoother process, and it's usually going to result in yeah, just better relationships. It all comes down to keeping good relationships for me.
What can a coach do to learn more about psychology to benefit their team?
So I guess one of the first things that they can do in terms of sounding, I guess, professional on it is United Soccer Coaches does have, it's either free or it's only like $20 of a coaching psychology certification. That's definitely a good one to start with. But yeah, for me, I really enjoy looking up the color groups. For example, like a blue personality is someone very analytical, numbers driven. Yellow type is going to be more of your social, outgoing. Then there's red as kind of your typical leadership or kind of that determined management. And green is going to be more of your not necessarily reserved, but observant and quiet. And I've really found it interesting to be researching and be aware of the personality types within those. That way I can be spending 5-10 minutes with a player or a staff member and immediately know, okay, this is what they're going to do when they're having a bad day, or this is what they're going to do when they're having a good day. So I think if coaches were to spend time on that, it would create a lot less conflict inside the locker rooms, inside the organization, and yeah, create just a happier place to be.
Is it important for you as a coach to also learn about your personality style?
Yeah, I think as a coach, you have to constantly be changing. One thing that I've really had the benefit of is, for the most part, I've always been working with people close to my age or older than me. But I know as I progress as a coach, that's going to be changing. There's going to be more of the social disconnect of me not understanding what's popular or trendy at the moment. So I think to constantly be looking at myself and seeing, okay, what am I doing that I don't like as a person? It's okay to have flaws. Everyone has flaws. It's just a matter of being able to accept those and find a way to work on them and overcome them. I do a lot of reflection. I do a lot of meditation. I found those two things to be very helpful for me and to keep me constantly improving, because I know if I'm not constantly improving, then I'm going to kind of be not only hurting myself, but hurting everyone else that I'm coaching.
Along with your personal flaws, there's also things like flaws in soccer and in the game. When you're coaching players, how do you encourage them to take feedback and be coachable?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess primarily for me, I really tend to do a kind of open laissez-faire approach on it, where it's, I want to ask the players questions. Okay, what did you see out there? There's a classic I've heard most commonly called praise sandwich. There's a few other words for it, but I'm going to be saying, okay, you're doing this really well. If you can do this, it's going to turn out well, but keep it up. I'm proud of you. I love throwing in the I'm proud of you, keep up the good work, just that positive reinforcement on it. I don't want to badger a player and have them feeling overwhelmed because I'm critiquing everything. Sometimes it feels really good just to hear, yeah, you know what you're doing. And yeah, it's kind of throw in the positive, negative, positive feedback. And yeah, just be asking questions, help the players try and learn on their own, but don't throw them in the deep end. Be just simply saying, okay, what did you see out here? Because this is what I'm seeing. But yeah, it's also important to remember that what a player sees is completely different from what you see. I mean, I'm sure as a player yourself, you might hear your coach yelling something and be thinking, what's he or she going on about? Like, that's not what I'm seeing. And that's okay, because it's our job as coaches to also remember that our viewpoint is completely different. So to keep that open dialogue and ask questions, because there's been times where I've thought to myself, oh, why is this player not doing that? And then I go and talk to that player and I'm like, oh, I totally understand why you weren't doing that. That made sense. Go on, like keep on doing your thing. So yeah, it's definitely keep that open approach and stay positive.
Right at the beginning, you mentioned why you started coaching when you were out with an injury. Was coaching always an option to you, or did it just come because you were injured and wanted to stay in the game?
If I'm honest, it only came because I was injured. It was always, I guess, something that I was interested in. Growing up, I always enjoyed the management side of things, like how players were handled or player movement between teams, that, yeah, that management type stuff. But but yeah, I never really thought about going into coaching because I guess I kind of always thought, oh, as a average player, I'm probably not going to be able to make anything of it. And then after getting injured and realizing, no, it's actually not about how you are as a player to determine if you're a good coach or not. I kind of felt that passion, that fire in coaching that I never had with anything else. I'm like, this is what I want to do. So, yeah, to answer it briefly, yeah, having the injuries actually helped me learn about my passion and where I am today.
And then you went on to coach people the same age as you. Was that a weird dynamic at first, or were you able to adjust?
It was a nervous dynamic at first. I think it was primarily because these were my classmates a lot of the time, or about half the team were players that were at least in my school. Like, how do I create a dynamic where I'm a coach, but also not making it very weird in our outside life and our at school or just doing whatever. But yeah, I learned that very quickly, as long as you just treat people with respect and try and understand them, they're going to respond well to you. And it helped me get confident pretty quickly because I could see the people I was coaching, they were interested to hear from me. And yeah, it was a good dynamic. I just kind of had to trust that they're going to look at me as a coach when they need to, and I need to trust myself to look at them as my players when I need to.
What advice would you give a young player wanting to start out their coaching journey?
So for me, it's going to be keep your head up. There's going to be moments where it might seem difficult. So yeah, keep your head up, be able to bounce back, and also a conversation is always great. Network. Unfortunately, right now, soccer is still very much a game of who you know sometimes, not necessarily what you know. So one thing that really helps me and one thing I always recommend to people, don't be afraid to reach out to anyone and everyone and say, hey, can I have 15 minutes just to ask you some questions? How can I learn? How can I get involved? They may not always respond. They may not always be able to offer you that dream job right away, but they're going to be, for the most part, a lot of people can spare 15 minutes and yeah, they'll be happy to talk because I think everyone knows once they're fully in the game, they remember how difficult it was to get in it. And there's a good culture right now, I think, throughout the coaching community of people just simply wanting to help each other.
I was actually just going to ask you about networking for a little bit next. How important is networking in the world we live in now?
Oh, I think it's probably the most important thing. There's unfortunately people I know who are absolutely brilliant that are struggling a bit to get involved because they don't have the right network. And yeah, I think everyone has the time to spend 10 minutes on LinkedIn, for example, or Twitter. One thing I did early on was on LinkedIn. I simply would click on one person, hit connect, and then the next 4 or 5 recommended. Click connect, 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 and then just reach out to them. It's a good way to quickly grow your network, and it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes. If you do that every day for 1 week, you're going to have a pretty good network for starting out, and it's only going to get bigger and yeah, bigger and better.
If someone is wanting to grow their network but doesn't know what to do first, what is the first step they should take?
I think the first step they should take is just say hi. Yeah, reach out to someone and be polite. Say, hi, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. I'd love to talk to you. Yeah, as long as you're polite, you're going to get a good response. And the worst you'll probably get is probably someone saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'd love to help, but right now things are a bit busy. Can you check back in a few weeks? Yeah, it's going to be one of the most difficult things in networking. I think it's going to have that confidence. I remember early on, thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to talk to this person. Might have stars in the eyes a bit just because of what they're doing. But yeah, as long as you're just happy and polite about it, you're going to get a good response and it's going to go a long way. Because for me, I try and remember everyone I talk to in some degree of, okay, if I'm doing this, they'd be a good person to come to. Uh, yeah, the worst that can happen when you network is they remember your name. And at the end of the day, remembering the name is what networking kind of is.
Reaching out can take a little bit of bravery sometimes, and that comes along with things on the field. Is bravery something that we can teach?
I think so. I think bravery has a lot to do with self confidence. I think you tend to notice, for example, players who are lacking a bit of confidence. It tends to come off a bounce of doing three, four things wrong. And they may not be as willing to go into a challenge. They may not be as willing to try and make that pass that could create a shot, and they're going to play a safer option. And I think that also comes back to the coaches needing to be positive and help reinforce and help motivate our players to be the best that they can be, because bravery to me is a direct correlation of self-confidence. If you can create a team that's confident in themselves and that's okay with making a mistake here or there, you're going to see the bravery and you're going to see the exciting things that contribute to why we love the game so much.
Can one player ruin the atmosphere of a team and almost ruin other people's self-confidence in a way?
I mean, for me, yes and no. Yeah, you can have players who might be having a bit of a bad mood, and everyone around might think, oh, well, that player's kind of frustrated and it's now raining on my good day. But I think what we need to do is, rather than, there's kind of the old like term of, oh, this player is a cancer to the team, bad attitude. I think all attitudes are fixable. I think a lot of frustration often comes, or when bad attitudes come, it can often be someone's not feeling heard or not feeling valued. And that comes to, if you just have a conversation with the person, see what's going on, they may open up and tell you, and it can immediately turn a struggling atmosphere into a good one. So, yes, I do think that bad players can have an impact on a team atmosphere, but I think every attitude is coachable.
We've spent the first little bit talking about coaching. Can you spend a little bit of time and talk about how important analytics are to our game?
Yeah, I think analytics, to summarize it briefly, analytics let you see what you're not seeing with your eyes. It's going to be gaining that edge for you. Yeah, using analytics allows you to simply solve the problems, in my opinion. It's, we don't know why this isn't working, or we know this is working. How do we make sure it keeps on working? Bring in the numbers, bring in video and clipping, and always be questioning it to try and strive for the best that you can be. And I think that's where analytics really come in to help. Is it really helps? Yeah, it pushes you to perfection.
Oftentimes, teams write down the stats and they have the video and the film, but they never use them. What should they do with these stats and film and everything?
I think especially for teams that are kind of forgetting to use them, make it a player first approach rather than saying, okay, the other team's doing this, or we're really struggling doing this. Word it in a way where, convey the numbers and say, hey, look at this. If we do it this way, or if we do it, or if we keep on doing it, rather, it's going to turn out to be great. We're going to achieve really cool things. And I think you're going to see a lot of players, especially in the younger generations, are really open to using data, really open to using video, because everyone likes the technology at their fingertips right now. We can send out, if we don't have time as coaches to take the 30 minutes going through the video and everything. Fortunately, there's the apps right now. There's Huddle, a few others I'm struggling to remember the names of right now. But we can send video out and say, hey, let me know what you think of this. And you're usually going to have a player that's willing to spend 5 minutes on their phone or 5 minutes on their laptop. So I think it's a matter of, we usually don't use stats because we feel we don't have time for it. But if we try and create a people first approach with the analytics, there's going to be a interest from the players, and it's going to become more worthwhile to coaches to use it.
I think for myself, and especially during this past high school season, I saw the stats, but if they weren't what I wanted them to be, I'd kind of beat myself down. What advice would you give a player when looking at their own stats that may not be matching how they feel they play?
Yeah, so for me, it's always sometimes the stats may simply be wrong. We always say numbers are black and white, and yes, they are. But at least in terms of with my scouting background, one of the first things I would do is always look at the data of a player and then watch video. That way I could quickly filter through, okay, is the data looking good? Good. Okay, now I'm going to watch and make sure everything matches up. Because there are times where I see good numbers and then I watch player and I'm like, wow, he or she, they're struggling. They're not really matching, or I'm not seeing how they're really doing this. But I also think it's important to remember with players, if you see something that you say, oh, I thought I was doing this well, but the numbers aren't really looking that kind to me, rather than allowing it to be a negative, try and form it into a way to be a motivator. Use it to set a goal for yourself to say, okay, I'm irritated because I thought I was doing better than this. I'm going to do what I need to do in practice or in games to make my numbers where I want them to be at this level. I love using numbers as a feel in a player, as a fired starter in a way to keep them driving. Part of, I think, goal setting, you should always throw in I really want to get to this level, and use a number. Make it more than just, I want to feel like I played well 3 days in a row or 3 games in a row. Make it, I want to achieve this 3 games in a row. And when you get that, you're going to get that satisfaction. But if you're not getting it, you're just using it as more motivation for you.
When you work with data, how do you make sure it is reliable, and how can you test to make sure the data is good?
So for a lot of what I've done, basically I've always had a provider in terms of data. It's always been Wyscout or Instat. StatsBomb is another big one that's becoming more and more popular. But yeah, in general, it's tough to make the numbers always reliable. You have to have a degree of trust in it that most of the numbers are being coded by people doing it for a living. But yeah, if it's not working out, then you just have to remember that, and you have to make sure that you're not letting it influence you too much in terms of coaching. If I see a stat where I'm saying, hold on, that's not right. Funny one, for example, is a goalkeeper had every one of his goal kicks coded as a goal that he scored. So you're looking over a report and seeing this goalkeeper put in 11 goals. Seems a bit weird. And yeah, it's just, you have to remember, okay, well, the numbers might not be what we need them to be, but we still have our eyes. We still have the human element of the game that we can look at and know things are going well or things aren't going well. And how do we fix that?
When I first found your story, I was actually just really interested in what you kind of do on a day-to-day. So in one of your roles, what would a day of your life look like?
Yeah, so I guess for me, every role I've had has felt very different. I've had the luxury of coaching at the youth level, being in the collegiate scene, and working in the professional scene across multiple sports. Yeah, so I guess for the general role, if I am doing like the performance analysis, it's going to be always working ahead. It's going to be the night or next day after a game, get it all analyzed, know what happened in it, get it out. That way, the coaching staff can move on and be adjusting training how we need it to be. And then also, I try and have every like opposition game, I'm doing full scouting reports for them, seeing exactly how do they concede, how do they score, what do we need to do to beat them. I'm putting that report in 3 or 4 days early. That way we can train it. So yeah, it's a lot of day to day. It's going to be, if it's a morning practice, going to a practice session in the morning and then spending 5 or 6 hours in the office doing the stuff on the laptop, be it opposition or coding the previous game. And usually at times, yeah, I will have to be working late into the evening to make sure I have everything done in season. But yeah, it can be really hectic days that switch from being on training ground and coming in and doing the coding and doing a presentation to either coaching staff or players. But to me, that's part of what makes it fun. It's if you like projects, performance analysis is a great role to go into because you're constantly working on projects in the off season. Some of my favorite moments have been just doing research on things, looking at 3 or 4 seasons of data and seeing, okay, how is every goal scored most commonly, and being able to learn that and apply it going to the next season. So I think as an analyst, it's busy days of questioning everything is how I would summarize it.
What are some of the projects that interest you the most?
So for me, I personally have always loved the goalkeeper performance side of it. When I was playing, I was a goalkeeper, and obviously, with some of my roles, they have been goalkeeper focused. So yeah, I love researching how can we improve our goalkeeping? How can we figure out, okay, should that shot that this goalkeeper just faced, should it have been caught? Should it have been parried? Things like that, creating a standard of it all and knowing what every league team is exactly looking for in a goalie and how can we train it to be the perfect goalie? How can we create that goalkeeper DNA, to take something out of the England FA of using the player DNAs? So those are always fun. I think one of the most fun things that I did was back with Ohio University and their women's team, and going through and doing a how our goals scored. Being able to code, okay, we know that I believe it was 42 or 43% of goals scored were played via a through ball into the box. So it became immediately, how do we train to prevent that as often as we can? And how do we change our player dynamics to make sure we're doing that as often as we can? Because we know as a league or as a competition, that's how the goals are being scored. And at the end of the day, soccer is a game of someone scoring more than the other team.
When looking at goalkeepers, is the mentality and emotional health different at a high school level compared to maybe a pro or collegiate level?
So yeah, it's I do think so, that there is a bit of a difference. I think it's the same with other players as well, not just goalkeepers. I think as you grow as a both person and a player, you're going to have different mental strengths. There was a study that was done on Spanish U18 and U16 players, and it was looking at their mental skills of was each position strong with, and how likely is that going to be to turn into a successful player at a high level. And one of the biggest things with goalkeepers were basically having that skill of confidence or the awareness and ability to bounce back. as it's often discussed, goalkeeping can be one of the loneliest positions on the field, and it takes a lot of mental strength to do it. So, as a coach, that's definitely where there has to be that positive reinforcement, as I keep on going back to, of making sure that your players, especially at the youth level, are staying confident. Because if they lose confidence, then that's where you're going to see players perhaps not only struggling to perform on the field, but they may start struggling to perform in the classroom, and they may fall in love with things that they love, such as soccer. So yeah, goalkeeping especially takes a lot of mental resilience. But as long as you have a support network, you're going to be able to be resilient.
When you work with a high school team, maybe not just goalkeepers, but the whole team, do you encourage them to read up on some of the things you might report on or the projects that you do?
So with the high school team, one of the biggest things that I like to do is simply say, watch a pro game, uh, watch what the professionals are doing, watch the player that's playing in the role you play. Now, obviously, yeah, a left back at team A may be a completely different scope of responsibilities from a left back at team B. But in general, watch what they're doing and try and replicate it. Obviously, we're not going to be playing at the pro level. If you're playing at the pro level, we wouldn't be playing high school. So beyond that, we have to be aware that it's not going to be perfect. But I think rather than giving players 10 pages of words at the high school level, either give them a video of themselves saying, hey, this is what you're doing well, this is what you need to improve on, kind of force a bit of reflection, or ask players to watch a pro game, because it's going to be no different than watching TV like they would every night, watching Netflix or something. Yeah, watch a pro game, mirror what the pro players are doing, and then come back the next day and tell me what you learned. It's I don't like making it seem like, oh, you have homework to do, because players have enough homework to do in high school. But if I can try and create a way of just generating that interest, you're going to be subconsciously on the field saying, oh, I remember this player doing this, I want to try it. And it's going to just be bringing that next level of skill and also a degree of fun with it.
How important is it that not only are you encouraging your players to grow and learn and reflect, but you are also growing and reflecting?
I think it's very important. I think, yeah, every day I have to be reflecting with myself, knowing what did I do well, how do I improve on it, what did I do poorly, how do I make sure that I don't let the players around me down again? Because when I'm performing poorly, I'm letting everyone else down around me. So it's important to be able to accept, for me, like, yeah, I tried doing this drill, it didn't work, scratch it off, don't do it again, or find a way to refine it. So yeah, having the self growth, having the every day just seeing or telling myself, what did I do well, what did I do poorly, it allows me to push myself to constantly be better. That way I'm not letting down the people around me, and that way I'm pushing everyone around me to be better with me.
What do you do to continue to educate yourself as well?
For me, it's a lot of reading, or I do spend a fair bit of time just in conversation with, fortunately, and this comes from networking, having the mentors or having people that I do respect, just conversations with them, asking, hey, what do you think of this? Create little scenarios with your mentors and say, okay, I have a player, like a coaching scenario for me. I have a player that has been really struggling on this for a week and a half. What should I do to help correct it? Here's the idea I had. What are your thoughts on it? That way I'm hearing reinforcement on my idea or critiques of my idea, but I'm also perhaps hearing a different perspective where I can look at and say, oh, I never thought about doing that, but I really enjoy that. So there's always that importance of talking with mentors and having a network close to you. But then again, you can also go on Amazon, search successful coaches, Jose Mourinho, not necessarily one that I follow closely, but one that does have a lot of great learning that you can do. Just look up the coaches that you admire from teams that you admire, read the books on them, see what they're doing, see what you can take away from it. And yeah, I guess to summarize it, it's a lot of conversations and reading is how I try and keep myself being the best I can be.
Who are some of your biggest mentors?
So for me, I've found that my mentors happen to be from the places I've been, and they've changed over time. And I think it's important to remember that mentors are allowed to change over time. So I guess the biggest one for me would be, his name's Ashley Allenson. He is one of the directors of coaching education at Ohio University. And he's a former Hull City player. But yeah, Dr. Allenson is a terrific person that I've talked to throughout my career, just because he's been multiple places as a player, coach, and working in the academic field on it. So I think Dr. Allenson, he's been able to always provide me with a lot of fresh perspectives. Another one would be also at Ohio University, Aaron Rodgers. He was kind of one of the first people that I worked with that really helped remind me of the cultural importance of a team. I think Aaron does a terrific job of creating a good culture, of creating a good dynamic. And I've really enjoyed the 2 years that I did have with him. I really enjoyed learning from him and stuff that I took with me wherever I was going. I guess, yeah, I can go on and on about people I've worked with, but another one that I feel has actually really helped are my players themselves. And it comes through asking the players questions of, what do you think? What did you like? What didn't you like? Because if I'm trying to teach players, I need to know what they're responding to. And that's how I'm learning, is knowing what works with my players. So if I can be not relying on them and asking them constantly to be planning everything for me, but if I can be coming to any of my players and say, hey, what did you think of that? I'm taking in everything they're saying. And they may not realize it. They may just think I'm asking their opinion just so they feel heard. But I'm actually taking it in to make myself better. So I think, honestly, my players have probably been my biggest mentor without me necessarily realizing it every day. So yeah, I think obviously people I've worked with, but definitely the players are mentors of mine.
I think this is a great place to start to wrap up. I have one final question, which I ask each guest. What do you hope people remember about your impact to soccer and the world?
I think people hope, or I hope that people remember what I try and do for the human side of it. I don't necessarily want to be the person that finds a magical statistic that solves all of the problems. I want to be remembered for helping players become the best version of themselves and going on and helping others become good versions of themselves. Yeah, if I can be remembered for what I do on the people side of things, I'll be very happy.
There is so much that goes into analytics, and you could really hear it with how Aiden talked today. When I heard analytics and I kind of found his story, I only really thought of what I knew from my high school season. And my personal stats were only my save percentage. That's it. He kind of talks about how there's distribution percentages as well and other things that you can really kind of focus on. And that's so interesting to me that someone can just look at the game and learn from the game and take these stats and help them learn in that way as well. I mean, again, also the people first idea. I had never thought about that with numbers. Numbers didn't really seem like they could correlate to helping the person out and making the person better. And that's just something that really interested me throughout this whole podcast, and it's still something now in the future that I'm excited to use. When he said that we could use shortcomings to set goals, that kind of like sparked in my brain. It's such a great idea, especially for this coming high school season and when I'm just playing in general, that I can use this goal for a higher stat to play better and play well. And that was just really interesting. Another way that analytics can be people first and that analytics can help teams and just individual players. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Aiden today, and until next time, remember to keep the game beautiful.